So that P2279 code just popped up on your dash, huh? Don't panic. You're not just dealing with a problem, you've actually been handed the very first clue in an automotive mystery. And in this explainer, we're going to solve it together.
Yep, there it is. That glowing little symbol on your dash. It's so easy to see it as just an annoyance, but really, that light is your car's way of trying to talk to you. It's the beginning of a breadcrumb trail, and that code is the first breadcrumb.
Exactly. See, this P2279 code isn't the problem itself, it's the clue that points us directly to the problem. Our job is to follow where it leads so we can uncover the real culprit. So what in the world is an intake air system leak? Okay, think of your engine's computer like a super meticulous chef. It measures the air coming into the engine with extreme precision, all to create the perfect air-fuel recipe. Unmetered air is like an uninvited guest crashing the dinner party. It sneaks in after the official count, throwing the whole recipe into absolute chaos.
And this rogue air, it leaves behind a bunch of other clues. Is your engine idling kind of rough at a stoplight? Does it hesitate a bit when you hit the gas? Maybe you can hear a faint hissing sound coming from under the hood. These are all telltale signs that this uninvited air is causing some serious trouble.
All right, so we've established the crime. We've got an air leak. Now it's time to do some real detective work. Line up the usual suspects and figure out who's responsible.
Okay, right off the bat, our investigation has a prime suspect. And it's not even close. A whopping 70% of the time, the culprit behind a P2279 code is a simple vacuum leak. Now, we can't ignore faulty sensors or other issues, but this is for sure where we need to focus our attention first.
Now, this vacuum leak, it can be a real master of disguise. Sometimes it's a brittle, cracked old hose. Other times it could be a worn-out gasket that just isn't sealing properly anymore. Or it could even be a failure in the PCV system, which is kind of like the engine's breathing system.
But what if there's no actual physical leak at all? You know, sometimes the problem is just bad intel. Your engine's computer relies on sensors, like the mass airflow, or MAF sensor, to tell it exactly how much air is coming in. If that sensor starts feeding it bogus information, the computer's gonna think there's a leak and trigger the code. And, going right along with that idea, maybe it's not even the sensor itself, but the messenger. If the wiring that connects that sensor to the computer gets damaged, the signal gets all corrupted on its way. The computer receives a garbled message and once again sounds a false alarm.
Here's a pro tip. Remember that criminals rarely work alone, and the P2279 code is no different. If you see it pop up alongside other codes, say one for the MAF sensor or maybe a lean condition code, those are accomplices. They can give you critical clues that help you zero in on the real issue.
All right, we've got our list of suspects. Now it's time to get our hands a little dirty. Welcome to the Engine Bay investigation.
Look, every good investigation needs a plan, right? And ours is pretty simple. We'll start with the basics, a really thorough visual inspection. Then we'll use our ears and listen carefully for that telltale hissing sound. And for the final confirmation, we bring in the heavy equipment, the smoke test.
So how do you find a leak you can't even see? Well, the gold standard, the best way is a smoke test. A special machine pumps harmless smoke into the intake system, and you just watch to see where it comes pouring out. It's the most reliable way to pinpoint the source, period. Now, there's a more, let's say, old-school method, and you have to be extremely careful here, where you spray a tiny bit of flammable fluid near suspected leak points. If the engine's idle speed suddenly revs up, well, the engine just sucked in that fluid and you found your leak.
But if you want the hard evidence, the real smoking gun, you're going to need a scan tool. You're looking for a value called fuel trim. You can think of it as a score for how much extra fuel the computer is having to add to the recipe. If you see that number creeping up past, say, positive 15%, that's it. That is your definitive proof that the computer is frantically dumping in more fuel to make up for all that extra uninvited air.
Okay, once you've found the culprit, the investigation part is over. Now it's all about closing the case, applying the right fix, and making absolutely sure this problem is gone for good.
So what's the fix? Well, it all depends on who the guilty party was, right? For our prime suspect, the vacuum leak, the solution is often a simple and pretty cheap hose. For others, it might be a new gasket or a PCV valve. And hey, if your investigation pointed to bad intel, then fixing the wiring or replacing a sensor is the key to closing this case. But hold on, you're not done yet. Don't just fix it and call it a day. These last steps are absolutely crucial. First, obviously make the repair.
Second, use your scan tool to clear that code out of the computer's memory. And finally, you've got to take the car for a proper test drive. This is how you confirm the fix actually worked and the computer agrees that the case is officially closed.
So what's the end game here? What are we aiming for? It's simple. A car that idles smooth as silk, performs the way it's supposed to, and, of course, a dashboard that is blissfully free of that pesky check engine light. That's how you know you've truly solved the mystery. So the next time that check engine light pops on, try not to see it as just a headache. See it as the start of a conversation, and ask yourself, what is my car trying to tell me? Because every single code is a clue, just waiting for a good detective to come along and solve it.